Well, hello, my sugar beasties. I'm Janine. This is That's Cakeable, and this week I thought I'd do something a little bit different. Haven't done a cake topper in a while, so that's what we're going to do. So, any of you parents or grandparents, in my case, of little ones, probably knows who this guy is like the back of your hand. Yep, you can probably hear it in your head right now. I know I can. For those of you that don't know, this is JJ from the hit YouTube channel and now Netflix series Cocomelon. Cocomelon is a musical series that focuses very heavily on nursery rhymes that aim to educate young children. Don't know about you guys, but my 2-year-old granddaughter has this on repeat. You know how it gets. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make a standing rainbow, the Cocomelon watermelon figurine, as well as JJ himself. And what I intend to do to make things a little easier to navigate is I'm going to timestamp every single part of the figurine down below. That way you can either jump ahead or rewind to watch that part of the tutorial once again. And while you're here, why don't you show another YouTuber a little bit of love? I mean, Cocomelon's getting loads. If you could subscribe to my channel by hitting that button below, I would really, really appreciate it. It takes 2 seconds of your time, but makes the world of difference to me. Well guys, I think I've babbled long enough. It's time to get on with the tutorial. Right guys, so we're going to start this from the bottom up. I'm using 5mm foam core here for my rainbow because it's stable, there's no drying time, it's just a really great tool to use. So I've taken a stencil of a rainbow, traced around it on the foam core, and now I'm cutting it out with my X-Acto knife. Just like that. Now I'm rolling out a piece of white fondant. I want it rolled pretty thinly and it's got to be big enough to cover the back of the rainbow as well as a little overhang. I'm covering one side of the rainbow with some piping gel and I lay the non-sticky side on the fondant. As you can see, I'm cutting a piece that's going to fit, flip it over, sticky side down. With enough overhang, I bring that overhang up over the side of my rainbow. And smooth that on with an acetate smoother. Bringing those edges over, just like that. And now I'm going to cut off the excess and cut inside, also allowing for excess. Fold that over. And then with my X-Acto blade, I go around and cut it flush to the back of the rainbow, all that excess coming off. Another once over with my smoother and I'll pop that aside. Now I've chosen pastel colors for my rainbow. You can choose any colors you like, but I'm just using some fondant here and I've gone with a pink, a yellow, a green, a blue and a purple, rolling it out into snakes with my fondant smoother and making them all around the same size. They've got to be long enough to go around the rainbow. Some have to be longer than others, of course, as you can see. Make sure that they're not quite as wide as you need them because we're going to flatten them down. Then I'm going to start stacking my colors on top of each other on top of the template using more piping gel to make sure they stick. Flatten it down slightly with the smoother so that we don't have actual round pieces. Of course, if you want to go for a round look, you can just make them slightly larger and keep them rounded. Once we've reached the top and smoothed it all down, of course we need to cut off that excess, which I just do using my X-Acto blade. One last little smooth and the rainbow is ready. Set that aside on a nice soft foam pad to dry. Let's make Cocomelon. So what I've got here are 2 pieces of modeling paste, exactly the same size, one dark green, one light green, rolled into balls. Now what you need to do is cut them both in half. Excuse my blade, it's been through the ringer. Half again. Then cut across. And then across again. Now what you need to do is remove a wedge from the dark green and replace it with a wedge from the light green. Leave another wedge of dark green. Remove a wedge of dark green, replace it with a wedge of light green, and so on and so forth. Now you want to gently press them together, very gently at this stage so as not to ruin the shape. I'm using my fingers here to buff all those edges together. And then once you've got it pretty well joined, give it a very light roll. I know that looks aggressive, but it's not. And it fuses everything together. Now, Cocomelon isn't quite round, so I'm just pushing the sides in a little, the bottom down and the top slightly more domed. I think it's supposed to be like a watermelon TV or something. I don't know the kids these days. I'm taking a coral piece of modeling paste here and I'm cutting it out into a rectangle, just freehand. Sizing it against the front of our Cocomelon. And when I'm happy with the size, I go around and just with my finger, I round out those edges. TV screen, think TV screen. Small piece of black modeling paste here, rolled into ovals will become Cocomelon's eyes. I flatten them down and then I attach them to the pink piece with just a little bit of water. Now make sure you get the spacing right here. Look at a reference picture. They're spaced quite a ways apart. If you put them too close together, it's not going to look like Cocomelon. So now I've got my two favorite food coloring pens by Fractal Colors, and I'm using that to make the nose and the mouth. I'll put a link in the description below of all the products I use for this project. To make the little cheeks, I've just taken some pink petal dust on the end of a Q-tip and just dabbed it right under those eyes. Back in with my white food coloring pen now, and I'm making the little catch lights for the eyes. And now what I'm doing is taking a small piece of white modeling paste, rolling it into a very thin snake, and I'm going to attach it to the entire border of the face, just with a little bit of water and using my smoother to help push it up against the sides. Cut off the excess and then join them at the base. Cocomelon also has a tiny little highlight right in the top right corner of his head, face, whatever. So once again, using my white pen. I've slightly smooshed down the front of the watermelon just to make it a slightly more flat surface to fit the face on. I attach the face with a bit of water and very gently round that around the watermelon. Now for the little bit at the top that the antenna sticks out of, I've just taken a ball of darker pink modeling paste, rolled it into a ball, flattened it down and made a little dome on top. Now some tiny busy work. Cocomelon's got a tiny little ladybug right on the side of his head, so I've taken some red modeling paste, rolled it into a tiny, teeny little oval shape, an even teeny tinier piece of black in an oval shape, and I've attached that to the red. I'm now using my white food coloring pen to make the eyes. My black food coloring pen will make the tiny little circles on his back. And then I got a little bit extra and put blue inside the eyes. And I just went ahead and attached that to Cocomelon with a little bit of water. Now I tried to make the antenna out of fondant, but of course they fell apart because they were just too thin. So I opted for some floral wire. Just be careful. Remember to let your clients know if you're using wire in any of your projects. And I painted them out with a little bit of purple. And then to top them off, two tiny little balls of light blue modeling paste. Cocomelon's done. Pop him aside while we work on JJ. Okay, so JJ's made completely of modeling paste. I've got some blue modeling paste here that I'm rolling into a blunt teardrop shape. I've got some corn flour up in the corner there if my hands get sticky. And then I'm just using the edge of my pinky finger to roll an indent in about 3/4 of the way up the body. I then do it again right at the top and pinch that and then roll it between my fingers to make a little neck. Looks a little bit like a beauty blender with a handle, I think. I don't know. So what I've done now is taken a thin piece of light blue modeling paste and I've cut that into a long rectangle shape. And I'm using that just as the center of his onesie. Attach that with just a little bit of water and cut off the excess. Now I've got a blue ball of paste that I'm cutting in half for 2 even pieces, and I'm going to roll that into a thick tapered snake, making sure that the ends are rounded, not pointed. Once again, I'm using the side of my pinky about 3/4 of the way down the snake, and I'm going to indent that area. I'm then flattening the end very slightly and then pushing it upwards to create a foot. Once again, with my finger, I'm going to indent around the base of that foot to give it some definition. I cut that at an angle after I've sized it against the body, and then attach it to the sides of the body with just a little bit of water. Of course, I gave him 2 legs because, well, that's what he's got. So making the arms is a very similar process, it's just they're slightly smaller and a little more tapered at one end. So once again, I've got 2 even pieces of blue modelling paste, and it's thicker at one end, as you can see, thinner at the other. At the thinner end, I'm cutting it off with a blade, and then just wrapping it slightly over my finger at the thicker end, I'm flattening it out. That's going to be the shoulder area. I've taken a very thin piece of light blue modelling paste, rolled it into a tiny snake and flattened it out, and then I'm going to use that to wrap around the end of the sleeve as a cuff. That ball tool up in the top right hand corner was used to make a little hole at the end of each arm also. With a little bit of water at the shoulder point of the body, I then attach the arms. So now it's time to make the hands, and I've just used some very light flesh tone coloured modelling paste here and rolled them into long, thin teardrops with a fat end. Flatten those little fat ends out. In that hole I made in the sleeve, I put the thin end of the hand in there, and his hands are done. Very, very basic hands. On the bottom of his onesie, on his feet, he's got little yellow pads, so I'm just putting 2 little balls of yellow at the end of his feet and rounding them onto the bottom of the onesie. Now JJ's got a cute little pattern on his onesie. They're little duckies. Don't go crazy and try to paint tiny duckies because we're just sort of representing the pattern. I've got some light yellow gel food color here. I've mixed yellow with some white to make sure it's nice and opaque. And I'm just painting little dots all around the onesie, the same with a light blue and then a slightly darker blue. And that's the onesie done. Let's make his head. We've got a large ball of light flesh tone paste here. And then I use my finger to indent about 2/3 of the way down the face, all the way around. Then I'm using my fingertips to sort of work in where his eyes are going, as well as gently pushing them inwards to create that bridge of the nose. He's got very big eyes. Remember, he's got very big eyes. I'm adding a dot of water at the bridge of that nose and adding a tiny little piece of flesh tone paste for his nose. Pushing that down, and then I've taken a silicone tool and just pushed up into the nose to make his little nostrils, slightly pushing them outwards. I'm now using a dotting tool, the tiny little ball tool, to make some sort of mouth lines that come from the side of the nose, and I smooth them out, soften them slightly with my finger. You don't want really harsh lines, he's a baby. Once again with my silicone tool, I'm making a point at each side where I want his mouth to begin and end, and I'm marking that out with the same tool. Of course you could use the Dresden tool for this as well. Softening everything out. Now I'm taking a medium-sized ball tool in those eyes, and I'm sort of making a windscreen wiper motion because his eyes are more oval than they are round. I also take a rounded tool and push upwards under his chin just to bring his chin forward slightly. There we go. Now to me, those cheeks aren't quite chubby enough, so a bit of plastic surgery here. I'm pushing my X-Acto blade underneath where the sides of the cheek are and just pushing some of that paste outwards, and then push that paste back inwards, not all the way though. Now with a bit of blending with your fingers, those holes will be covered and you've got nice big chubby cheeks. I'm now taking a large tic-tac shape of white modelling paste, cutting that in half, and I'm flattening them down slightly and popping them into his eye socket. So now we've got more oval shaped eyes with a flat base. Now I'm using a piping tip. I will double check and put in the description below what size I used, just to mark out the center of his eyes. It makes this part, the tricky painting part, a lot easier. I use nail art brushes for this sort of work because they're so fine, and I'm just painting around that circle that I've made with a dark brown gel food color, just straight dark brown gel. But we need to lighten it up a little, so I'm taking a damp Q-tip and just gently dabbing around all that brown area. Make sure you leave the edges nice and dark and that it gets lighter as it goes into the center. Now I'm using another piping tip, slightly smaller, to cut out some black modeling paste to make the center of his eyes. And I just pop those in there. I want it to be uniform because the actual eyes painted. I'm using some black gel color and painting over the black section as well. Makes it a lot easier having that guide there already though. A very, very teeny tiny piece of white modeling paste will make the catch lights. That's the hardest part done, guys. I'm terrible at painting brows, so I mark in where I want the brows with a modeling tool, and then I just paint on some very light brown little brows. Now we're going to make JJ's little tuft of hair at the top. Now, this is a piece of gold modeling paste rolled into a long teardrop and then modeled into what I can only describe as a poo emoji shape. You'll get my drift. I cut the base off that and then just attach it to his head with a little bit of water. I've just used a tool to make some little marks in the hair there also to make it a little more hair-like. Then very gently with some pink petal dust, I blush up his cheeks, a little bit on his nose, and then I go to town and just very lightly put it all around his face. I've mixed it with some cornstarch here too, just to make sure that it's a build-up rather than a big plonk of colour. Build the colour up, it's a lot easier. I also used a small brush and put some along his mouth. Now I'm cutting that part of that neck off, we don't need it that long, and I'm running a skewer right through the centre of his body. Now you want the skewer to go through the body and for there to be enough at the top that it will hold his head without going through his head. Be careful. A little bit of royal icing on the base there, you can use water if you'd like, and then I place his head on top of his body. How cute is he? Now he's missing ears, so I've just got two tiny little pieces of modeling paste, the flesh colored modeling paste, rolled them into balls, dotted in the center of them with a small ball tool, and then cut them in half. And then very carefully attach those to the side of his head. And that's our JJ done, guys. Now to put the entire topper together, I've taken a 4-inch round piece of foam core that I've covered in the same color my cake is covered in, which is a 6-inch cake. 2 reasons for this. Number 1, the models can be quite heavy, so if you're using a real cake, remember to douse your cake before putting your base on top. And the other reason is you can remove it and keep your topper. So I'm putting a toothpick up inside the foam core that our rainbow is made of, and I'm attaching that to the foam core piece on top. I just secure that with a little bit of royal icing. Then I put Cocomelon where I want Cocomelon to be. I'm just sort of placing them where I like them and attaching them with a little bit of royal icing also. JJ's right next to him. And that is it, guys. That is our Cocomelon cake topper with JJ and a rainbow. And that is how you make this cute JJ Rainbow Cocomelon cake topper. I know for sure that there'll be a little one in your life that would love this on a cake. As you can see, I just made a very basic dummy cake for it to sit on for the purpose of this tutorial. And as simple as it was, it still looks pretty effective. All the focus is on the top. Well guys, thank you so much for joining me again this week. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And like I said earlier, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell too, because then you're informed every time I upload a new video. All right, I'm rambling again. It's time for me to go, and it's time for you to go and get your cake on. I'll see you next time, guys. Bye.